Hello everyone, in this lesson we'll learn how to create a very simple calculator as is visible in front of you. And the promise is that the total number of lines, JavaScript code lines that you have to write is no more than 20 lines, okay? So it is going to be very simple and very efficient. It is going to provide all the basic functionality. So 8 times 2 is 16, minus 4 is 12, divided by 3 is 4, and then square root of 4 is 2. 2 times 10 is 20. 20 plus 10 is 30. 30 divided by 3 is 10. Okay, so all the functionality is there. If you press CLS, it will clear the screen, and if you use this number, so 200 times 2, so everything is working and it is providing the basic functionality. So I can guarantee that probably this will be the simplest calculator on YouTube. So let's get going. Let's start the project. I will right mouse click on my desktop and I will create a new folder and I will call it calculator. I will drag and drop this folder onto my Visual Studio Code icon, which will open the folder in the Visual Studio Code. You can see that there is no file in there. I will close this and I will also double click on this folder. The folder is indeed empty. I am going to create a new file and I will call it index.html. I will press tab and the Visual Studio Code has created an index file, and you can see the index file is also there, which is a blank HTML document. If I click and double click on it, it will open in my web browser, which is Google Chrome at the moment. I will type in exclamation mark and I will press tab, and this will create a basic HTML skeleton, or the boilerplate as it is also known as. I will change the title of the document. I will call I'll say calculator. I will save it and refresh it. You'll see that the title of the document has been changed to calculator. Within the body element, I am going to create a div and I will give it a class of screen. I will press tab and we have created a div that has a class of screen. There are two components of a calculator. One is a screen, in which when you click a button, you'll see a number visible in that screen, and then there is another part which holds the buttons of the calculator. So I will go just before the closing head tag and I will say style. Here I will type in my CSS and I will target the screen element, the div with a class of screen. So dot and then screen, an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. I will give it a border 2 pixels, solid black. I am going to save it, and this div is now visible on the web browser. I will give it a width of 200 pixels and a height of 50 pixels. File, save, refresh, and this is a bit magnified. So this is the actual size, 200 width by 500 by 50, 200 by 50. It is a rectangle which we will use as the screen of the calculator. I want to create another div and I will call it calculator. Tab, and we have created another div that has a class of calculator. Now this is the only HTML that you have to write. I am going to type in a script and press tab, and here I will type in my JavaScript, and I will create buttons within this element. So if I say button here and I will say something, save it and refresh it, you can see that the button is visible here, but I am going to remove this. So the inner HTML of this div and this div both are empty, but I am going to create some buttons within this div with the help of JavaScript. So before we do that, let's grab these two elements in variables within JavaScript. So I will say let v screen. I am creating a variable with the name of v screen. V I'm using for variable, so it's easier for me to remember what is variable and what are other things in the JavaScript. So I will say document dot query selector, and I will use the name of the class, which is screen. And that is how you can save an element with the help of class. Query selector method is being used, and this element has been saved as this variable called vScreen. So if I say console.log vScreen, file, save, refresh, I will press F12 key on my keyboard, and you can see indeed on line 26 we are displaying the contents of this variable as console log, and indeed this variable has this element saved in it. I will also grab the other element with a class of calculator. So I'll say vCalculator is equal to document dot query selector, and I will again use the name of the class, which is calculator. I will also console log it vCalculator. So we want to see the contents of the variable called calculator. I am going to save it, refresh it, and you can see indeed on line 28, this is line 28 here, we have this element saved, this one, that is a class of calculator within this variable called vCalculator. The next thing is that I am going to create a button. So I will create another variable called vButton, and I will say document dot create element method to create an element called button, and the element that I want to create is button. Now if I now save it, let me console log it as well, console.log and vButton. All right, so we are displaying the contents of this variable vScreen on line 29, then vCalculator, and then we have just created an element with the help of JavaScript, and that element is button, and we have saved that element within this variable. File, save, refresh, you can see that indeed we have an element, a button element on line 31. We are console logging the contents of this variable, which is indeed a button. However, the button is not visible on the web page. The reason is that this element is still in the memory within this variable, and this element is not attached to either this element or this element or this element. The reason it was visible previously, because we created a button with the help of HTML, and that this element is attached to the body element, and that's why it was visible. So all we have to do is to use vCalculator variable, and I will say append child, and I will append this element called vButton as a child of this element here. Okay, now this should be visible. File, save, refresh, and the button is visible. It's a very small button. So I am going to go into my style area, and I will target all the buttons within the web page or the application. I'll say width 50 pixels and height of 50 pixels, and I will also give it a border radius. Let's see how it looks like right now. File, save, refresh. So that is the width and height of our button. I will also give it a border radius of maybe 7 pixels. File, save, and refresh. So we now have a button and the screen area, but this button does not have any text written on it. So usually a calculator has 7, 8, 9 and all the other numbers. So I am going to create another variable, and I'll create an array this time, vButtons array. Okay, array is very similar to a variable. The difference is that it can hold more than one values. So the way you create an array, you use the word keyword let, and then the name of the array, and then an opening square bracket and a closing square bracket, and this can hold more than one elements. So 1, 2, and because these are numbers, I'm not using any single quotation. But the next thing that I want to use is the plus sign. So this will be in the single quotation, and then I also want to use create another element, which is an is equal to sign. So file, save, nothing should happen. And now we want to populate this button with this number here. So I am going to say v button dot text content, and the text content of this v button, we want it to be equal to this array, v buttons array, and we want to pick this value which is at index 0. So I will type in 0. I am going to save and refresh, and you can see that this element has been picked up from this array. If I use 1 here, so index 1, the number 2 is at index 1, so this button should now have 2. If I want to use this element, I'm going to say this is 0, 1, and 2. So if I say 2, file, save, it will pick up this plus sign, and if I say 3, it is going to pick up this is equal to sign. Okay, so these are indexed. So this is index 0, 1, 2, and 3. I am going to leave it at index 0. File, save, refresh. So number 1 is visible. The numbers are way too small, so I am going to go to the style area, and I will say font size, and I will say 30 pixels, and I will also change the font family, which is Verala round. Now you might not have this font available in your Windows. I have downloaded it from Google Fonts. You can use any other font or leave it like that. It will use the whatever font is being used by your browser. File, save, refresh. The font size is bigger and the font family is Verala round. Now we have to create more than one buttons, and we have to use all the numbers that are usually available on calculator. I have so far used 2 numbers only, but we'll learn how to add all the numbers. So I am going to say, I'm going to run a loop, for loop, and I will say for let I is equal to 0. Okay, so I am creating a loop, and within this loop I'm creating a variable called I. The initial value of this I is 0, as the value of this index is 0, and I want to run this loop. So loop runs again and again, but I want to limit how many times the loop runs. So I will say v buttons array. Okay, so I'm using this variable, and I will say dot length. What I'm saying, run this loop as long as the length of this array, which is 4 at the moment, okay, is less than the length of this array is less than the length of this array, which is 4. So loop, so it will actually have 3, but the initial value of I is 0. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. So the loop will run 4 times, and every time the loop runs, as long as the value is less than the length of this array, I want value of I to be increased by 1, and then an opening curly bracket, and I will enclose everything up to here within the body of this loop. Okay, so v buttons dot length, v buttons array dot length, there is a mistake here. We forgot to write I. So the initial value of I will be 0, and the value of, as long as the loop will keep running as long as the value of I is less than the length, which is this one, 4 at the moment, which is less than the length of this array. And if the length of this array is less than this length, then the loop will keep running, and every time the loop runs, the value of I will 1 to the value of I will be added. So the first time loop runs, the value of I will be 0. Second time the loop runs, the value of I will become 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we do not need this now. Now the loop should run 4 times, it means that this line of code will run 4 times, 4 buttons will be created, and this line of code will be run 4 times, and this line of code will also run 4 times. File, save, refresh. We have 4 buttons, but every button has this number 1 because this is hard coded, and every single time the loop is running, it is still picking up this this value, index 0. The way to resolve is to use the variable called I, because the value of I will be changing every single time the loop runs. So if I go to file, save, refresh, we now have different values on the buttons which are being picked up from this array. All right, the next thing is to be able to see the number. Whenever a button is pressed, we should be able to see that number within this screen area. So we have saved this element within this variable. So I will have to add an event listener. I will say v button dot add event listener, and the event that we want to listen to is click. So whenever a button is clicked, the JavaScript will listen to the event click, and whenever that happens, we want to run a function. I will call it calculate. Okay, we still have to write this function. We are saying that whenever a button is pressed, run a function. Whenever button is clicked, run a function called calculate, but we have not created that function. Okay, and you can name it whatever you like. I have called it calculate. So we have to create a function called calculate. So the way to create a function is to use the function keyword. The name of the function is calculate, which we have used here, an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis, and an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. Okay, so the first thing that I want to say is vScreen.innerHTML. The inner HTML of this element. So vScreen is the name of this variable that has this element saved, and the inner HTML is the space between the opening tag and the closing tag of this element, which is empty at the moment, and that's why we see that the screen is totally empty. So we want to say change the inner HTML of this element to v button dot text content. Whatever button has been pressed, every button has a text content. If 2 is pressed, the text content of this button is 2, and we want to show that number here in the screen. So if I save it now and refresh my browser, if I click 2, you'll see that the 2 is visible here, however this 2 is very small and we want it to appear on the right hand side. So we will go back to our style area. We already have this screen element targeted with the help of class, and I will say font size 30 pixels, and if I now save it and refresh it, press a button, the font is much bigger. I want the same font as this one, so I will say font family Verala round. I am going to save it and refresh it, press 2. We have the same font. We want it to appear on the right hand side, so I will say justify content right side. Is it gonna work? No, it's not gonna work. File, save, refresh, press a button, it is still on the left hand side, and the reason is that this property only works with display flex. If I now save it and refresh my browser, press a button, you'll see that the number is visible on the right hand side of the screen. However, it is not vertically centered, it is top centered. Okay, so I want to say align items center. This line of code, this property of CSS will bring the contents within the center of this screen. So file, save, refresh, I will type in a number, click a number, and this is appearing on the far right hand side just as we wanted. Notice whenever I press a button and I press a next button, the first number disappears, and the number that was pressed recently is now visible. We do not want that. We want it to hold all the digits that we are clicking. And there is an easy way to fix it. This line of code is controlling whatever is happening here. So we are replacing every single time we are clicking a button, it is replacing the inner HTML of this element to whatever button has been clicked. So we, instead of typing replacing it, we want to append it, and I am just going to add a plus sign here, and that will fix the issue. File, save, refresh. If I press now 2 plus 1 plus 1 and is equal to sign, so every number that we clicked, every button that we clicked is visible in this screen area. Now when we click this is equal to sign, we want it to calculate, provide a calculation. So 2 plus 1 plus 1 should be 4. We do not want to see this is equal to sign here, and we can fix it with the help of an if condition within our function. So I will say if v button dot text content is strictly equal to is equal to sign, then what should happen? In an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket, we want v screen dot inner HTML to be equal to v screen dot inner HTML. We are reassigning the value of v screen, whatever has been typed in this screen, which is this one at the moment, but we are reassigning, we are capturing that value, and we are reassigning the value to what? I will say substring, and substring is a method that holds everything within the screen, and it will start at 0 index, which is this one at the moment 2, and it will I will say v screen dot inner HTML dot length. It will measure the length of the string and will subtract one digit or one element from the right hand side. Okay, so over here we are saying that if the button that has been clicked is this button is equal to sign, we are saying v screen dot inner HTML, which is this content at the moment, we are reassigning this value to v screen dot inner HTML, and we are using a substring method. We are saying that we want to start from 0, index 0 of this string is this one, and we are saying measure the length of this string, which is 1 2 3 4 5 6. If it starts from 0, so 0 1 2 3 4 5, the length of it is 5, and we are subtracting 1 from it from the right hand side. So we are removing this is equal to sign from here. File, save, refresh. If I press 2 plus 1 and then I press is equal to sign, you should not see that sign. I've made a mistake somewhere. v screen dot inner HTML dot substring, this is the error here, so it should be no space. File, save, change the size of my text editor, refresh it. 2 plus 1 is equal to, and then you'll see that is equal to sign is no longer visible. It is just this string which is evaluatable, so we can evaluate, we can add 2 plus 1 with the help of a JavaScript method that is known as eval. So I will enclose everything within this single parenthesis, and I will use the keyword called eval. Okay, so eval is a method that will evaluate the expression. File, save, change the size of my browser, refresh it. If I press 2, refresh, 2 plus 1 plus 1 is equal to sign, it should say 4. Refresh it, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. Refresh, 1 plus 2 plus 1 2 should be 5. Okay, so we have achieved the basic functionality. We also, what we now have to do is to add more buttons to it. So I am going to go to another tab and I will type in calculator, and we'll go to images, and I'll find a calculator, a simple one. This one, for example, So it has numbers 7, 8, 9 and then divided by. So I'll remove all these. I will say 7, 8, 9 and then after comma within single quotation, because this is not a number, I want to use this /, which is used as a division symbol. Okay, the next numbers are, let's see how it looks like now. File, save, refresh, and that's how it looks like. So the next numbers are 4, 5, 6 and the multiplication sign. So 4, 5, 6 and within single quotation asterisk, which is a multiplication sign in terms of mathematics. File, save, go back to this tab, refresh it. We have these numbers, but the numbers are sort of going out of the body of the calculator. So we can target this element within our CSS area. So I'm going to go down to line number 27 and I will target this element with the help of class. So calculator, an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket, and I'll say width 200 pixels. File, save, refresh. We have fixed our issue with a simple CSS property. So the next numbers are 1, 2, 3 and the minus. So we'll go back to our array again and I will say 1, 2, 3 and within single quotation minus symbol. I am going to check again, file, save, refresh, and then the next thing that we want to do, maybe AC or CLS, and then 0 dot and is equal to sign, or plus sign is there as well. Okay, so I am going to say single quotation CLS, and then I'm going to say dot within single quotation, and then again the next thing that I want to use is did we use 0? No. So I want to use 0, and then I want to use this plus symbol. So within single quotation plus sign, and then if I now save it and refresh my browser, all these numbers have been added. So we have added one more row to our calculator. We also need an is equal to sign here, which is this one. So I'm going to add a few more things. I will add 00 as well. I will also add, I'll press Alt key and 251 on my numeric keypad, and this has to be in single quotation and then comma. Okay, note, if you do not have a numeric keypad, you cannot use alt codes. I'm using alt code for a square root symbol. So we also have to have an is equal to sign. So within single quotation is equal to sign. File, save, go back to our calculator, refresh, and we have 3 more buttons. Okay, now it is functional. So 7 times 8 is equal to 56. 56 times 7 is 8. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. 1 times 10 is 10 plus 20 is 30. 30 divided by 10 is equal to 3. So it is fully functional. Even these numbers should be working. 300 times 2 is 600. But if I click this button here, it adds to whatever the number was. We want screen to be clear if we press this button here. So we can add another if condition. So I will say if v button dot text content is strictly equal to CLS, then what should happen within curly brackets? I will say v screen dot inner HTML should be equal to an empty string. So file, save, refresh, do some calculations, and if I press CLS, it should clear the screen. Okay, so this is functioning. So everything is functioning with the exception of this square root function. So what happens if I want to find out the square root of 4? If I click 4 and then click square root button, we'll see that the square root symbol is visible within our screen area. And we can fix this with the help of a very similar code to this one. So I can add if condition, if v button dot text content is strictly equal to, within a single quotation, alt key on my keyboard and 251 on my numeric keypad. Notice if you do not have a numeric keypad, you cannot use this. So you'll have to type in a code for the square root symbol, which you can Google. And I am going to say if that is the case, we can use something very similar to this one. However, I'm going to use a different method so you can learn a new thing. So we will say v screen.innerHTML is equal to, we are reassigning the value of vScreen.innerHTML. Okay, we're changing this, which was 4 with this symbol. So we want to change this. We have captured this in this place here, and I want to say reassign the value to vScreen.innerHTML dot replace method, and within parentheses / and alt 251 / again comma, and then single quotation and single quotation empty one. Okay, so what we are saying that if the button that has been pressed is this one, the text content is this one, then reassign the value of inner HTML of vScreen, change it to vScreen.innerHTML, replace this symbol with an empty string. So I will save this, resize my text editor, refresh my browser. If I click 4 now and press the square root symbol, the square root symbol is not visible. Okay, so we have removed the square root symbol from the screen. Now that we have done that, we can use another method, a JavaScript method. So I will enclose everything within the parentheses, and I will use a method called math.sqrt, which will calculate the square root of whatever the answer to this piece of code is. File, save, change the size of my browser, refresh it. I will type in, click on 4, square root symbol, which is 2, refresh, 16, square root 4, again square root 2. Okay, so it is now fully functional. Our calculator is fully functional, and we have created this calculator with very minimum JavaScript code. Okay, format page, right mouse click, format document, and I will remove the empty lines. We'll calculate the lines as well, but before we do that, this looks very odd. Okay, so is equal to symbol is smaller, we can have one more button, or we can change the size of this button. So I'll change the size of this button. So I am going to say if condition here, if v button dot text content is strictly equal to sign, then within the curly brackets I will say v button dot class name is equal to, I will create I'll say equal. Okay, so we are applying a new class to these buttons. All the buttons have this these properties, but we want it to have a class of equal. So we will go back to our style area dot equal. We have to use the same name that we used here, and within curly brackets I will simply say width of 100 pixels. All the other buttons are 50 pixels wide. This button will now be 100 pixels. File, save, refresh, and that hasn't worked because I will have to move this line after the values have been assigned to the buttons. So file, save, refresh, and we now have a bigger button that shows the is equal to sign. So as simple as that, it's a very small calculator. So I am going to format the document one more time, right mouse click, format document, and I will also go to edit, and I will find and replace. I will type in the caret symbol, the dollar, then backslash and n. What we are trying to do is to find all the empty lines within this page here, and I will click this, which is use regular expressions, and I'm going to remove all the empty lines here. Okay, so if you count the number of lines within the JavaScript, so this is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16. We have written only 16 lines of code, and we have created a fully functional calculator. If you count the total number of lines including CSS and including HTML, it is only 56 lines. So this is the simplest calculator that you can make with the help of very minimum code and very quickly. File, save, and there you have it. You have a fully functional calculator which will work and will provide the basic functionality. You can make it as complex as you want, but before you can do that, you have to learn how to create the basic functionality. So we have learned how to clear the screen, we have learned how to use the math square root function, and we have learned what is the inner HTML. We have learned a lot of concepts. We'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you very much.